The night market of Callaway smelled the way it always did after rain, wet stone and roasted chestnuts and the faint sweetness of bruised flowers left too long in their buckets. Mira Ashvale moved between the stalls with practiced ease, her basket heavy on her arm, her mind half on the dried lavender she still needed to bundle and half on the argument she'd had with her landlord that morning. 14 silver coins. That was what stood between her and being thrown out of the only room she'd ever called her own. "You've got that look again," Dessa said from behind the neighboring stall, not even glancing up from the ribbon she was braiding. Dessa could read Mira the way most people read weather. The one where you're calculating how many herbs you'd have to sell to fix whatever's gone wrong. "Everything's fine. You said that last week when the roof leaked." "Everything is manageable," Mira corrected. She set down her basket and began arranging bundles of rosemary with more force than the task required. "There's a difference." Dessa opened her mouth to say something probably wise and certainly unwelcome, but the crowd shifted, and Mira's attention snagged on a figure moving through the market like water moving around stones. Effortless. Unhurried. Wrong. Not wrong in a way she could name immediately. The man was tall, cloaked in dark fabric that caught no light, his hood drawn against the drizzle. Plenty of people dressed that way in autumn. But nobody else in the market moved the way he did, with that absolute, unsettling stillness between steps, like the act of walking was something he was choosing to do out of courtesy to everyone else around him. He stopped at her stall. Up close, she caught a glimpse beneath the hood. A jaw like a blade's edge. Dark eyes that held the firelight without reflecting it. A mouth set in an expression that had probably forgotten the shape of a smile a very long time ago. "Willow bark," he said. His voice was low, textured, like it had been worn smooth by centuries of use. "Do you carry it?" "Third bundle on the left." She pointed without looking. She'd learned not to make eye contact with men who made her pulse do strange things. It only encouraged them. He reached for the bundle. His fingers brushed hers. The world fell out from under her feet. It always happened this way when her gift activated. A crash, a flood, sensation before image. But this was nothing like what she'd felt before. She'd accidentally touched old merchants and received 50 years of memory. She'd brushed hands with grieving widows and felt decades of love and loss. Once, she'd touched a war veteran and spent an hour afterward shaking on the floor of her room. This was not 50 years. This was not decades. This was an ocean. 380 years poured through the contact point of their fingers like a dam had burst. Battles she had no names for. Winters so long they seemed to last lifetimes. Grief that had been carried so long it had changed shape, hardened, become part of the architecture of the person carrying it. And underneath all of it, something lonelier than anything she'd ever felt, not the loneliness of a night or a year or even a decade, but the specific loneliness of watching every person you've ever loved grow old and leave while you remained, unchanged, stranded on the shore of your own immortality. Mira yanked her hand back so hard she knocked over the bundle of dried thyme behind her. The man's eyes had sharpened. He was watching her the way a hawk watches something unexpected move in the grass below. "What?" she said, and her voice came out steadier than she deserved. "Are you?" "Someone buying willow bark." He set 3 silver coins on the table. Enough to cover 5 bundles. He made no move to take change or extra goods. "How much did you feel?" She picked up the thyme. Put it back. Picked it up again. Her hands needed something to do. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." He tilted his head slightly. The torchlight caught his eyes, and she noticed for the first time they weren't simply dark. They were amber, deep amber, ringed with something older and stranger at the edges. "You went pale and pulled away like you'd touched a flame. Most people don't react when our hands make contact." "I'm not most people." "No." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. More like a door opening somewhere behind his face. "You're clearly not." Dessa had gone very quiet at the next stall, pretending to braid ribbon with intense concentration that had nothing to do with ribbon. Mira crossed her arms. "I don't know what you think my reaction means, but I'd like you to take your willow bark and move along." She lifted her chin the way she'd learned to when she needed to look braver than she felt. "And for future reference, I don't date older men." The silence that followed was exactly one heartbeat too long. Then the man's expression shifted again, and this time it was something she genuinely couldn't categorize. Surprise, she thought, quickly swallowed. And beneath the surprise, something that looked almost like hunger, controlled and ancient and instantly frightening. Date, he repeated the word like he was turning it over, testing its weight. You know what I mean. I don't think I do. He picked up the willow bark slowly. I think you should be more specific about what you're refusing. Mira opened her mouth. Closed it. My name is Caelum. He said it without ceremony, without the weight most people gave important names. And I'm not here to court you. A pause, measured and deliberate. I'm here because my sister is dying and you're the only person in 3 kingdoms who might be able to find her. The market noise continued all around them. Laughter, bargaining, rain on canvas, like the world hadn't just tilted sideways. Your sister, Mira said carefully. She's been missing for 7 months. His jaw tightened. And she's running out of time. Mira looked at the 3 silver coins on her table. Looked at the man who had lived 380 years and carried every one of them in his eyes. Looked at Dessa, who had abandoned all pretense and was now openly staring. Start talking, Mira said. You've got until I finish bundling this lavender. The road north swallowed the last of the market lights within an hour. Mira sat across from Caelum inside a carriage that smelled of cedar and old leather, watching the dark trees blur past the window and wondering at what exact moment she had lost her mind completely. Dessa had grabbed her arm before she left, eyes wide, whispering something urgent about strange men and unmarked carriages and basic survival instincts. Mira had squeezed her hand, promised to send word by morning, and climbed in anyway. 14 silver coins. That was still the number sitting at the center of her chest. Caelum had offered 200 gold pieces simply for her attempt. Not her success. Her attempt. The distinction had been deliberate, she realized. He wasn't buying results. He was being careful not to make promises he might not be able to keep. That carefulness unsettled her more than arrogance would have. You haven't asked me anything, Caelum said from the opposite seat. He sat with the stillness she'd noticed at the market, one arm resting along the window ledge, watching her the way she imagined mountains watched weather, without urgency, without particular concern. I'm thinking, Mira said. About whether to run. About why a king is sitting in a carriage with a herb seller instead of sending someone with a letter and a bag of coins. She turned from the window. You could have done this through a messenger. Why come yourself? A pause. Outside, an owl called once and went silent. Because the last 3 people I sent to find someone with your gift didn't come back, Caelum said. Whatever took my sister knows I'm looking. They've been removing my resources. His amber eyes held hers steadily. I decided the only thing I couldn't afford to lose, I should retrieve personally. The carriage rolled on. Mira absorbed that. You think I'm in danger just from you finding me. I think the moment I walked to your stall, I may have made you a target. Something crossed his face, not guilt exactly, but its older, heavier cousin. Responsibility. I want you inside my walls before anyone realizes what you can do. It should have frightened her. It did frighten her, underneath the surface where she kept things she didn't want examined. But it also, inconveniently, made her trust him more than she wanted to. The Silverwood fortress emerged from the tree line like something the mountain had always intended to grow there. Dark stone, broad towers, windows burning amber against the night sky. Waterfalls threaded down the cliffside on the eastern face, catching moonlight as they fell. Mira pressed her face to the carriage window like a child and immediately resented herself for it. Inside the gates, a woman was waiting. Sarin stood with her arms crossed and her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes moved over Mira with the swift assessment of someone who had spent a lifetime calculating threats. She was tall, brown-skinned, with close-cropped hair and twin blades crossed at her back that she wore the way most people wore jewelry, ornamental only to strangers. This is her. Sarin said. This is her, Caelum confirmed. She's smaller than I expected. I'm standing right here, Mira said pleasantly. Sarin's mouth moved. It might have been a smile. Your rooms are ready. The locket is on the table. She glanced at Caelum. You should sleep before you do this. Both of you. We do it tonight, he said. Sarin looked at Mira. Mira shrugged. Sarin sighed in the way of someone who had been sighing at this particular man for a very long time and had made peace with the futility of it. The room they gave Mira was warm and quietly overwhelming, a bed with 4 posts and deep green curtains, a fireplace already lit, a copper basin filled with water that steamed gently in the cool air. She touched nothing. She stood in the center and breathed and reminded herself this was temporary. 10 days. Maybe less. They brought her to his study an hour later. The locket was small. Gold, fine-chained, with a pressed violet sealed behind the glass face. Ilara's, Caelum explained, standing at the far edge of the table with his hands clasped behind his back like he was restraining them. She wore it every day. It was on the floor of her room when we found the room empty. Mira looked at it without touching it yet. The gift she carried had no polite name. Her mother had called it sorrow reading, which wasn't quite right. She could feel age, intention, emotional history, the accumulated weight of a life pressed into objects and skin. It was useful. It was also exhausting in ways she'd never fully explained to anyone, because explaining it meant admitting how much of other people's pain she carried home inside her chest every night. If I see something difficult, she said, I need you to not touch me. Whatever I look like, however bad it gets. Don't touch me. It doubles the input and I lose the thread. Caelum nodded once. Understood. And if I tell you to leave the room, you leave. Something moved behind his eyes. She suspected he hadn't been asked to leave a room in several centuries. Understood, he said again. Mira sat down, rolled her sleeves back, and picked up the locket. It was different from touching a person. Objects held impressions like cloth held perfume, fainter, more layered, easier to sort through if you knew how. The violet behind the glass bloomed first. Ilara picking it from a roadside, laughing at something, tucking it into the locket with careful fingers. A brother watching her. Caelum's affection through his sister's memory of it, warm and awkward and enormous, the love of someone who had forgotten how to be soft with most people but couldn't quite manage hardness with her. Mira breathed through it. Then the darkness came. Rough hands. A hood. Not panic, Ilara had been trained past panic, but cold, calculating fury, cataloguing details even as she was dragged. Stone floor. River smell. East, she'd thought. We're moving east. A voice she recognized, smooth and educated, dripping with false warmth. The kind of voice that had learned to perform kindness so well it had fooled people for years. Lord Fenwick. Mira knew the name without knowing how she knew it. She'd pulled it from Ilara's memory of recognition, the terrible lurch of realizing who had arranged this, who had smiled at breakfast that morning and then ordered her taken before noon. She saw a room. Stone. A narrow window. A coastline below, grey and winter-stripped. A single word carved into the window ledge by something sharp, carved in small, desperate letters. Grayvale. Mira set the locket down. Her hands were shaking. The study swam for a moment before settling. Caelum was across the table exactly where she'd left him, still as stone, his jaw so tight she could see the line of it from where she sat today. He hadn't moved. Hadn't touched her. Had watched her face go through God only knew what expressions and held himself in place through what must have been considerable effort. Grayvale, she said. Her voice was rough. She's at Grayvale. Coastal. Stone prison, eastern-facing window. She's alive. She pressed her palms flat on the table. And she knows who took her. She recognized him. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Who? Caelum's voice was very quiet. The quiet of something large and dangerous choosing not to move yet. Mira looked at him. Your Lord Advisor. Fenwick Crow. The fire in the hearth crackled. Somewhere deep in the fortress, a door closed. Caelum stood absolutely motionless for a long moment, and Mira watched something happen behind his face that she couldn't quite name. Not surprise, because she suspected he'd feared this possibility for weeks. More like the final confirming click of a lock he'd hoped would never close. How certain are you? He asked. I pulled it from Ilara's own memory, Mira said. She recognized his voice. She knew him. Caelum closed his eyes. Opened them. The amber had gone very dark. Rest, he said. We ride at dawn. They rode with 12 of Sarin's most trusted wolves and no announcement. No horns, no banners, no royal procession. Caelum had stripped himself of every visible symbol of rank before dawn, riding in a plain dark coat with a sword at his hip that looked like it had seen genuine use across several centuries. Mira rode beside him on a grey mare named Sable, who had a deeply unimpressed attitude toward everyone she encountered, which Mira respected enormously. Sarin rode ahead with 3 scouts. The rest fanned behind in loose formation, quiet professionals who communicated in glances and hand signals, and occasionally the subtle shift of ears that reminded Mira these were not ordinary soldiers. You should know, Caelum said on the 2nd hour of riding, without preamble, that Fennec has been with me for 60 years. Mira looked at him. How much of that time did you trust him? All of it. His jaw worked. He helped me negotiate the Eastern Peace Accords. He was present at my mother's death. I gave him a seat at every table that mattered. A pause. He used that access to map everything I would need to protect. And then systematically removed those protections. Why Alara? Because she's the one thing I can't think clearly around. He said it without embarrassment, simply as fact. He knows that if she's in danger, my attention fractures. My judgment suffers. He's been using these 8 months to move pieces into positions I haven't been watching. His voice dropped. I've been so focused on finding her that I haven't noticed what I was losing elsewhere. Mira thought about the exhaustion she'd felt in him that first night at the market stall, even through the brief brush of fingers. Not just physical. The tiredness of someone who had been running toward one thing while the ground was being pulled out from under their feet in the opposite direction. He underestimated one thing, she said. Caelum glanced at her. He didn't know about me. She kept her eyes on the road ahead. He planned for everything you had. He didn't plan for something you didn't know you needed. A long silence. The trees moved around them in the grey morning wind. No, Caelum said quietly. He didn't. Grayvale was exactly as Alara's memory had shown it. A coastal fortress of black stone perched on a cliff above a winter sea, with narrow windows and a single road in that would be very easy to defend and very difficult to assault without losing people. Sarin spent 20 minutes studying it from the tree line, asking precise questions in a low voice, receiving precise answers from her scouts. Then she turned to Caelum. The East Tower. 3rd level. 2 guards inside, 1 on the roof. Fennec? Caelum asked. Inside. Main hall, most likely. He'll have heard nothing yet. The plan was simple, which Mira had learned was Sarin's preference. Distraction at the gate. 3 wolves through the sea cliff entrance, which the scouts had found unguarded because no one expected an approach from that angle in winter. Caelum and Mira through the east passage. You don't have to come inside, Caelum told her. Your sister might need someone who can read whether she's hurt beyond what she appears, Mira said. I'm coming. He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded and said nothing more, and she was grateful he didn't argue. The east passage smelled of salt and old stone. Mira kept close behind Caelum, who moved through the dark with the absolute confidence of someone whose senses extended well beyond the human. He stopped twice, holding up a fist, and both times she stopped perfectly still and heard nothing and trusted him anyway. Both times, footsteps passed overhead and faded. They found Alara on the 3rd level. She was sitting on the edge of a narrow cot when the door opened, and she rose instantly, barefoot on the cold floor, with her hands up and her chin lifted in a posture of defiance that was so purely her brother's it almost hurt to look at. She was 19, slight and dark-haired, with exhaustion pressed deep beneath her eyes and a cut along her jaw that had healed badly. Cael, she said. Her voice broke on the single syllable. What happened next was private, and Mira turned to face the door and gave them 30 seconds of it, listening to the hallway and pretending she couldn't hear Alara's breathing fracture or the low, wrecked sound Caelum made when he pulled his sister against him. When she turned back, Alara was upright, wiping her face with her sleeve, visibly reconstructing herself into someone who was fine. Mira recognized the effort because she performed it herself regularly. You're the herb seller, Alara said, studying her. Mira Ashvale, Mira confirmed. I found you through your locket. Something lit behind Ilara's tired eyes. The gift. Mother talked about people like you. She glanced at her brother. Does she know about the... Not now, Caelum said. Know about what? Mira asked. Ilara opened her mouth. Caelum gave her a look that had probably silenced war councils. Ilara pressed her lips together with the expression of someone filing something away for later with considerable enthusiasm. They moved quickly through the passage, Ilara between them, Sarin appearing like a shadow at the cliff entrance with two of her wolves, and the particular expression of someone whose plan had worked exactly as intended and who was professional enough not to look smug about it. Fennec was contained, Sarin's word, delivered flatly, in the main hall with 4 guards and no exits. On the cliff road, with the sea below them grey and endless, Ilara caught Mira's hand. The contact lasted only a second, accidental, but Mira felt it anyway, not 380 years, but 19, bright and fierce and tangled with relief so overwhelming it brought tears to Mira's own eyes without permission. And threaded through it, from Ilara's memory of conversations, of her brother's face across a lifetime of dinners and arguments and silences, she felt the word again. The same word she'd felt the night of the blood oath, rising from somewhere beneath language. Mate. Ilara saw Mira's expression and said nothing, but her hand squeezed once before releasing. That evening, in the great hall of the Silverwood fortress with Ilara safely wrapped in a fur and eating her 3rd bowl of soup with the focused determination of someone who had eaten very little for 7 months, Caelum found Mira on the balcony outside the eastern corridor. She was looking at the mountains, her arms crossed against the cold she refused to admit was bothering her. You felt it again, he said. Not a question. Through Ilara. She didn't turn around. It's a mate bond, isn't it? That's what you wouldn't let her explain. Yes. And you've known since the market stall. I've known since you touched my hand, he said. I didn't expect it. I'd stopped expecting it after the 1st century. He came to stand beside her, not touching, giving her the space to breathe. I won't pressure you. Whatever this is, whatever you decide it means, that's yours to determine. Mira stared at the distant white peaks. She thought about 14 silver coins and a room she'd been about to lose. She thought about her mother's voice warning her about touch and about connection and about the dangers of being known. She thought about 380 years of loneliness so heavy it had changed its own shape. She thought about a man who had come to beg instead of command, who had held himself perfectly still while she shook through visions, who had stood at the edge of his own fortress with his sister finally safe and his greatest betrayer contained, and looked at Mira the way you look at something you are trying not to want to obviously. I'm not saying yes to anything tonight, she said. All right. I'm saying I'll stay past 10 days. See what this is. She finally looked at him. But I'm keeping the 200 gold. The corner of Caelum's mouth moved. Slowly, unpracticed, like a door that hadn't opened in a very long time, it curved into something that was, unmistakably, a smile. Every coin, he agreed. Mira turned back to the mountains and said nothing more. But she didn't go inside. And neither did he. The cold was easier with someone standing beside you who had weathered 4 centuries of worse.